Welcome to Did I Throw Enough Grenades? The Psychology of Destiny. In my opinion, I'm the least important person on this stage, so I want to quickly introduce myself. I want to share how this panel came about, introduce our panelists, and let them convey to you their favorite aspects of the Destiny universe that left them intellectually, emotionally, and academically in awe. To start, my name is Dr. Jared Kilmer. I'm a clinical psychologist with Respect Psychological Services, where I primarily provide therapy and assessment services to neurodivergent kids and adults, as well as folks in the tech and games industries. Last year, myself, the panelists on stage, and half a dozen others wrote a book together about Destiny as part of the Zeitgeist of Pop Culture series. This volume that we put together constitutes a collection of academic essays on the psychology and humanity found in one of the richest game universes we've ever had the pleasure of exploring. Today, we'd like to share with you a sample of mini lectures that highlight the passions and interests of the authors on stage. Before we get started, though, I'd love to introduce our panelists to you now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Amelia Herbst. I am a licensed clinical psychologist at Respect Psych, so I don't have to go through the whole fun intro again. I'm also the vice president of a really small, very cool con in the Pacific Northwest called Geek Girl Con. My pronouns are she, her. I don't know, I'm going to add a fun twist to this that is going to probably throw Jared off. I'd like to say that I main as a warlock.
Hello, oops, that was maybe a little close. I am Bjarge. I am a fifth-year PhD student at UC Santa Cruz, and I study storytelling in live service games. And I've now at this point written, I think, 5 academic papers on Destiny, which makes me probably the most prolific person on Destiny in academia, which is weird. And I main a hunter.
Hi, I am Kira. I am a classicist, art historian, and actual Dr. Jones, which is totally why I finished my graduate degree. I work as a historical consultant and a Latin consultant on film and media, and I also teach on the side. And I am here for the Warlock Supremacy.
Hi, I'm Patrick Weiser. I'm a licensed graduate professional counselor with Creative Psychological Health Services. I do a lot of play therapy with kids, and I will continue the Warlock train rolling. I am here to represent all the Well-locks.
My name is Connor Napier. I'm a designer, I'm a writer, and artist for Gemhammer. I'm not a clinician of any kind. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing here at all. I am also a warlock, so I guess we just win.
Spoke too soon. I am representing the Titans on stage today. Yeah. Look at me, it's a power fantasy, and I love it. For myself, I thought I could steal the spotlight from everyone else today and talk about my chapter about growth mindset, but I decided against it. I wanted to give more time to everyone else. But I would encourage you to check it out. It is specifically about the ways in which Bungie works to foster growth mindset in their players through their own game design. What I want to do instead is read just 2 paragraphs from the introduction of the book to give you a sense of who I am and what this game means to me before we pivot into the real heart of this panel. But I remember when I first got my hands on Destiny. It was fall 2014, and I had finally saved up enough money to buy that slick, white PS4 bundle with Destiny. Do you remember? It was so exciting to me. None of my friends had that model. They had the basic black one. I carried it out of the store. I placed it in the trunk of my car. I immediately opened the box to remove the copy of Destiny, because in truth, I was only interested in the console. I didn't want the game. I already had plans to get rid of it. Next door, there was a GameStop. I walked straight in, requesting to sell a copy of the game I had no interest in playing. I was naively confident they would love that. My copy was still sealed in the plastic. It couldn't be in better condition. It seems great for resale. But they wouldn't take it. I didn't know about this, but unbeknownst to me, they have a policy against purchasing sealed games. It kind of makes sense in retrospect, but it surprised me in the moment. I said, fine. On my way home, I realized this could be a cool opportunity. I could just try Destiny out, like a rental. I'll play the campaign, a couple days later, I'll sell it. No big deal. 10 years and thousands of hours later, I'm still playing. And I think there's something to that. But now I want to pivot. I should have shown me. This is my Titan, by the way. I'm not just speaking. But I want to let Dr. Herbst talk about nightmares and resolutions.
So very quickly, you could tell that I have a very certain aesthetic, and I will not pivot from this costume ever now. Nightmares and resolutions, they kind of match, right? So my chapter in the book is specifically looking at mental health and Season of the Haunted. One of our other panelists referred to it as the season of group therapy, and quite frankly, it actually kind of was a little on point. So for those of you that haven't played Season of the Haunted, aren't super familiar with it, Season of the Haunted was the one season where we need to come all together and support our various non-player characters, Crow, Zavala, Keitel specifically, in helping to work through their own nightmares in order to stop Callus's ships. So what's really interesting about this is that when Eris talks about nightmares, prior to Season of the Haunted, as well as during Season of the Haunted, she refers to it as a tie to trauma. For those of you that aren't super familiar with trauma, trauma is something that it's either directly experienced by us, it's directly experienced by somebody close to us, or it's an event that we have been privy to in some way. First responders can have trauma even if they are just showing up to tragic events. How we deal with that trauma is based off of how we interact in the world. So all three of the lovely NPCs that we have to navigate this fun group therapy session with are all absolutely avoiding their trauma. All three of them in very different ways. We start with Crow and having to come to these essentially fight Uldren, right? So he's got this other individual that wears his face that speaks similarly to him and has kind of similar ideas to him, and is constantly being reminded, but I am still you, but I am still you, but I am still you. And in a lot of cases, for folks that lose their memories or for folks that have gone through some kind of major shift to make them change entirely who they are as a person, if that person that they were before has a lot of negative memories attached to it or even positive memories attached to it, it's really hard to look back at that person and the connections that they made and determine, yeah, like, you know, I should answer for the things that this person did. Or, no, I don't feel connected to this family, this friend group, this whole future that I had prior to this. And a lot of what Crow has to deal with is attempting to navigate whether or not, like, he should accept what Uldren did on him because he wears that face, because he, you know, in quotations, was essentially Uldren Sov. And it comes to the end that when he keeps having this fight with Uldren, like, no, I'm not you, no, I'm not going to accept this, he has to acknowledge that he's running from this reality. And by acknowledging that he's running from this reality and having to come to a place of peace with this, can his nightmare be dismissed and turn into a memory, and can he move forward? Zavala is very interesting. So we learn about Zavala's family in Season of the Haunted. What makes Zavala particularly interesting is not just the fact that his nightmare, his wife, is telling him, like, you need to move on. You ran right back to your guardians. You ran right back to this thing that you know. You didn't actually forgive yourself. So in an odd way, the nightmare is telling him exactly what he needs to do and is making him feel shame for it. And while this is happening, the Guardian is fighting Kethix, which is the very entity that killed his son. So in the process of having to work through his own trauma with the nightmare of his wife, the Guardian, you know, an individual that he feels very responsible for, has to be fighting against the very person, thing, memory, nightmare itself that killed his son and is the reason why his trauma is so deep. What's kind of interesting is that when this book was getting edited, the final shape had just come out, and we had this interesting thing where I had to say, I think Savala still has some healing that he needs to do. I don't quite think he's there yet. And as those of us that played the final shape, spoilers, you begin to realize that Savala still has some healing to do. He might have started that journey when he let the nightmare turn into a memory of Safi, but he's not quite there yet. And last is Keitel. Keitel's been through a lot. And her defiance of having to take place in this ritual is really difficult. Because without her, there's a very strong nightmare that's tied directly to Callus that does need to be tackled. Her father is her nightmare, and he's still very much existing and causing trouble. But her nightmare of Dominus Skull, the other father figure that she had to realize that she looked up to him. He's one of the reasons why she became who she was until he betrayed her and all of her people, right? If it weren't for the selfishness of these two men, her homeworld could have been saved. So she's losing so much more than just her father figures or dad's a real jerk. But she also is mourning the fact that she had to be put in the position that she was because she was essentially abandoned. Her people were abandoned, and she had to become a different leader for her people. And Keitel's trauma is a lot deeper and a lot more complex, but it's a lot more fulfilling to watch her come out the other side of it. And very quickly, the Guardian can't do anything. The Guardian can't swoop in and save the day. So the Guardian needs to play the role of a support. And I think for the first time, it's a good role for the Guardian to play as being that support figure. You can't heal people's traumas for them. You can just stand there and be by their side for whatever they need.
Dr. Amelia Herbst, thank you.
All right. My chapter is about this little piece of text that appears when you enter damage phase in the Athena fight, which says, Guardians make their own fate. And in this chapter, I talk about just how true that statement is across the entirety of Destiny. It is present in the fictional narrative, of course, but it's also present in the story of the community and the meta-narrative of the game as it's developed over time. I make the claim in this chapter that the fictional themes of the game, the story of the Light and Dark saga, as we've seen it, is sort of echoed in this meta-narrative. During the last 10 years of Destiny, the story of the players and our many exploits have been interwoven with the fictional narrative. And this is obvious in community moments like the Loot Cave or the Bagel 4K 999 moment, which literally get referenced by the lore. But I also mean this in a more general sense. And to understand what I mean here, we need to go into a little bit of the aspects of Destiny's development and its narrative. I'm not going to spend too long on the history of Destiny. You can read the chapter if you want to know more, but I want to highlight a few things. The most important of this is the idea of when Destiny was announced early on, we became aware of the 10-year plan. Partly through ambitious marketing and through a literal leaked production plan with Activision, showing how they had an actual plan for Destiny's development for the next 10 years. Bungie positioned this as more than a single contained experience. They were promising it's going to be a persistent living world that was going to evolve over the next 10 years. They promised that all our guns would have a story behind them. And there were going to be reasons to check into the game week over week. And let me just clarify that this was in 2014. This was there were some MOBAs and MMOs, but it's before live service games as we really know them today. It's 3 years before Fortnite, 3 years before battle passes, before we all hated loot boxes. The audacity to think that players would still be interested in Destiny 10 years after, before the game was even out. Well, here we are. Now, it won't take long for most people to point out that the 10-year plan lasted about 2 years. Taken King came out on schedule, but then Destiny 2 came out a year later than planned, and then the next 3 games in the Destiny franchise never came out. Sorry, Activision. The story of Destiny's development is one of ups and downs. Destiny Vanilla was, as most people who played it remember, pretty rough. Taken King, pretty good. Destiny Vanilla, bad for almost the opposite reasons as Destiny 1. And then Forsaken, great. Witch Queen, banger. Lightfall, you get the point. Even when Destiny has had plans and directions, these plans have always shifted and changed. It's never followed a straight, clean path. Now next, I need to describe a little bit of Destiny's fictional theme, specifically the story of the light and the dark. It's going to be heavily simplified, I'm aware if there are lore people in the audience. But the very short explanation is the light is a force of growth. It creates life in complex shapes, while the dark is a force that culls and destroys that which is too weak to survive. Serving the dark just means chasing the simplest, most effective solution. It is honing the short into the sharpest possible blade. Following the light, reversely, means giving into complexity and failure. It means assembling ineffective tools into weapons and accepting difficulty. If we follow the darkness to its ultimate conclusion, we get the witness wanting to create the final shape, where everything is pristine and unchangeable. The light, however, demands that the world should be able to change and thus be imperfect. As players, we often talk about the evolution of Destiny as if we wanted to reach a better, more improved version of itself. It is easy for us to imagine a closer to perfect Destiny with eternally evergreen content, with new raids and dungeons and activities every month, where the PvP is balanced, and one that caters to both the hardcore raiders and the most casual story enjoyers. However, that's not what we have, and it's not what we're getting. A shape that is both complete and ever-changing is a paradox. If the past years of seasonal Destiny has shown us one thing, is that we are not approaching any kind of form of an idealized form of Destiny. The seasonal content over the past many years has been pretty messy, I think we can agree. It's as varied in quality, it is inherently ephemeral, a bunch of important story moments are just gone. It was not part of the 10-year plan, and I know for a fact that developers would like to keep it in if they could have. And now they're throwing the whole seasonal model out to try something else. In other words, Destiny's seasons has not made Destiny a sharper version of itself, but a more complex one. Each season has reinvented what a season could be. It took mechanics or areas from raids and turned them into story missions. Let us be pirates and cowboys and subsea explorers. This makes me make this perhaps a bit ludicrous claim that the creation of Destiny follows the logic of the light, not the logic of the dark. Destiny has increasingly shown that it is not achieving or pursuing a final shape of Destiny. Instead, it is constantly needed to reinvent itself and constantly regrow into new forms and shapes. The community has always wanted the game to be different from what it is at its present moment. When it's too confusing, it needs to be simpler. When it is too simple, it needs to be more mysterious. Destiny has been walking this tightrope since the beginning, and the fiction tells us that we will never reach a perfect state. We literally stop the final shape from happening. And in the greatest irony of all this, we did see a conclusion to the 10-year plan. Through a vastly different road than we could have predicted, we did get to a point where Destiny's narrative did conclude roughly 10 years after it started. So maybe there's just a little bit of the dark in there as well. And within all this messy development, we have us, the players. And the players make their own fate. Because the true power of the light and the dark is that we all have the ability to change Destiny. It's important to remember that the light and the dark are other literal forces in the world that grants us our abilities. And this is meant very literally, when a warlock uses Chaos Reach, they are literally using the light to bend physics to their will, and we call this a Paracausal effect, because it defies the expected cause and effect of physics. And as Guardians, we just bend the rules of causality. When the text Guardians make their own fate appears in the Vault of Glass, it is because we as Guardians, literally and fictionally and mechanically, use our supers and grenades and our abilities to break the logics of physics, and the Vex just can't handle that. So they lose. And this is echoed throughout Destiny. When we as Guardians and players change the world, we do it because we're paracausal. And I can't help extrapolate this out to the larger meta-narrative of the game and all the different ways we've also changed the game. And I think the moment that encapsulates my point the best is one of Destiny's greatest and most silliest moments, which is a weekend the community has after named the Craftening. In the weekend of 15th to 17th September 2023, players discovered that they could use the crafting system to create weapons that should not exist. For example, you could create a shotgun with the frame of an assault rifle, leading to a gun that shoots as fast as an assault rifle, with a spread of a shotgun with every single shot. This is quite broken, as you can imagine, and this is a relatively benign example compared to what people could make. This completely upended the entire play experience of every single player. Every PvP match, every raid, every strike, every activity any player did with any other player, even if you weren't using these weapons yourself, someone else were, and they were going to kill you. For a weekend, Destiny was just a different game. In a way no one had planned, Destiny's fictional themes, perhaps even the original promise of the early marketing, was fulfilled in a tremendously silly way. For a weekend, every gun was a story. For a weekend, the players made their own fate, took the systems of the game into their own hands, and crafted ridiculous things. The crafting is perhaps the most Paracausal event in Destiny's history. Moments like these are how we make our fate in Destiny. They're the moments when the game is something more than a piece of software or more than a fictional narrative. They're the moments when we cause the game to change because of what we do. The moments like when we shoot into a cave, when we kidnap Sir, when we bring the Prometheus lens into the Crucible, when we realize the drop rate of perks on weapons is not entirely random, when we go into a raid with 12 guardians, like lunatics. When we do all those things, we make our own fate. Thank you.
All right, well, I wrote my chapter on the Sister of Shapes, the deepest in the High Coven, the Witch Queen, everyone's favorite moth mother, Savathun. Here's the thing about me, I like stories. I like how they get woven together in games, and especially how they take things from antiquity, so from Greece, Rome, the ancient Americas, and how they kind of put a new spin on things. So, of course, when I saw a ridiculously powerful, very cunning god of intelligence, I went, oh my god, that's Athena. And that's basically what my chapter is about. Savathun's whole thing is that she gains her power through people misunderstanding her. She always needs to be the most clever person in the room, and she becomes more powerful by constantly getting us to misjudge her. So the way that I went about trying to understand her, which probably made her infinitely more powerful, so sorry about that, was to look at her through the lens of the Greek goddess Athena. And especially Athena in the Odyssey in particular. So when we first meet Savathun in Destiny 1 and the early parts of Destiny 2, she's a big cosmic bad. We don't really know what she looks like. We come to know her through what she's doing in the world. So, we go into a mission and there's a big shrieker above us and it's the Eye of Savathun. Well, obviously it's not exactly Savathun, but it's doing horrible things, so we interpret that as her. She is literally unable to be understood at that point. All we can do is conjecture. And it's not until we get to the season of the hunt when she actually becomes a character with motivations that can be analyzed and understood. When she's talking to Morozov, she could as well be talking to Athena. So she says that, I thought that you were a powerful, competent woman plagued by a difficult relationship with her family, weaving long-spun schemes across the bow of time. Athena, in particular, is the goddess of wisdom, of cunning in the Greek world. She is the goddess of weaving, not just cloth, but also stories. As Mechanidas, she's the goddess of inventing, and in one poem in which the poet was not too happy with her, she is Athena Apaturia, the deceptive one. So we're already starting off with a lot of names that are very similar. And the big thing about Athena in the Odyssey, and just a quick show of hands, how many people have read Homer's Odyssey here? A good portion of you. Okay, so I never know what they're assigning in high school anymore. So basically, the Odyssey, we've got this dude, Odysseus, who's been fighting in the Trojan War. He makes a series of really, really bad choices, pisses off the gods, ends up taking 10 years to get home. On the opposite side of that, we've got his son, who has been languishing on his home island of Ithaca without a father. His palace is being taken over by a bunch of really rude guys who want to marry his mother, and Telemachus, the son, is just kind of stuck there. So that's the Odyssey. It's the story of Odysseus coming home and the story of Telemachus becoming a man who is able to stand by his father. In the Odyssey, Athena plays both a character and a god. So she is the god that is directing all of these events, but she is also a character who takes on the form of one of Odysseus' supposed friends and actually like guides Telemachus through his own hero's journey to become what he needs to be. And I'm going to ask you all to cast your minds back to the Season of the Lost opening cinematic, where we get the voiceover from Savathun, and we see her hive ruin, the picture from the front of the Witch Queen expansion box, superimposed over the Traveler. Y'all with me? Kind of remember that? You can look it up on Google. It's a really cool piece of art. So that is above a host of characters. We've got Crow, Ikora, Saint 14, Zavala, etc. Also, we have the guardian or ex-guardian Osiris. Now, with her hive rune above the Traveler, it's telling us that Savathun is operating as a god. So she is directing events at the same level as the Traveler. But as we progress through the cinematic, we find out that, oh no, Savathun is actually Osiris at this point. So she's also now a character within the story. And Athena does exactly the same thing. She starts out as a god who is telling Zeus what's going to happen, and then she turns herself into this friend of Odysseus. At one point, she makes a great joke where she says that she's praying to the gods, and in reality, she's just praying to herself, and she's going to make everything come true because, you know, she's a god and she can do that. So Savathun is in the story as a character that we can meet, and she is also outside of that world as a god, and we're seeing the fruition of all of these hundreds of years worth of plans. Now, one of the most interesting things that Savathun does is she kind of takes on Crow as a mentor. And Crow is really, really similar to Telemachus in this case. So Telemachus is stuck at home with a bunch of suitors who kind of want to kill him. He is very much a child. He doesn't have any personal agency. And it's not until Athena gets there as the character who's coincidentally named Mentor that she is able to actually kind of push him out of that mold. And we see the same thing with Osiris and Crow. Crow is stuck on the tangled shore with Spider. Spider kind of wants to kill him if he steps out of bounds. And it's Osiris who actually brings Crow into the last city, intercedes with him just as a mentor would, just as Athena does with the Trojan lords. And ultimately, it is Savathun who gives Crow back his memories. Now, I'm going back to what Amelia was saying. This is kind of crucial for him to overcome his trauma. He can't overcome the trauma if he can't remember it. But because he has that other Aldrin in his head that Savathun gave back to him, he is able to then come to terms with it. He's able to repair his relationship with Mara, which allows him to jump through the veil, to overcome the witnesses' bribes, and essentially to set us up for success in the final shape. So because of Savathun, he's essentially able to become that, you know, really, really good guardian that's able to make a lot of good choices and set us up for success. So, yeah, she's definitely a badass, but she's also done a lot of good for us. And I'm holding on strong to the fact that, spoilers, we will be best friends again. So just fingers crossed. Please, Bungie. Thank you.
Alrighty, so I'm here to talk to us about the end game of Destiny, and I'm not talking about fashion because if you look at my Warlock, that is clearly already solved. So we're talking about raiding in Destiny. We're going to break it down to really what the core concepts of raiding are. Raids are 6-player endgame activities with various puzzles, boss encounters, and unique mechanics. Most recently, we had Salvation's Edge come out, and we had to deal with basic high school geometry, the horror. And these raids give us unique loot. We get randomized drops for armor, weapons, a chance at a unique exotic weapon, And cosmetics like emblems, seals, and then even outside of the game, something I think Bungie does really well is give the opportunity for real-life swag, like raid jackets, rings, right? But we're not here to just talk about raids. We're here to talk about the contest mode raid. And contest mode is very special in that during the first, now 48 hours of a raid, you can challenge something called contest mode and compete in the contest mode raid race. This is happening at a fixed power level, so hobgoblins will one-shot you, and that's something you just have to deal with. You have no knowledge of the mechanics. You have to sort of figure those out for yourself. And you're racing against a bunch of other really powerful fire teams to be the first one there and raise that coveted raid belt. Now, what's really special about raids is it's the perfect crucible, let's see what I did there, for several social, psychological concepts and interactions between teammates, and we're going to focus on mainly those interactions between teammates today. Now, I'm only one person, and I have interactions with my fire team, but I wanted to see what other people thought, and so who better to ask than Dado, who is very well known in the Destiny universe, and Saltagrepo, who is a 4-time world's first raid winner. And so I did 2 interviews with them and sort of got their experiences of what do you look for in a fire team member? What are the highs and the lows of doing a raid race? With tens of thousands of people watching you, what added pressure is there to perform well? For Saltagrepo, he was at one point competing for back-to-back-to-back titles. What added pressure is there for him? One of the big pain points that they discussed was misaligned expectations. And what I mean by that is, imagine I'm going into a raid race with a fire team, and I want to try and complete this raid as fast as possible and get a good placement in the raid race. Whereas there are 2 or 3 people in my fire team who don't necessarily feel that same way. They want to look around at the beautiful skyboxes Bungie's created, learn the mechanics at their own pace, and just sort of take it all in. That's just conflict that's waiting to brew. And so what I suggest is having this sort of session 0, sort of like D&D, where you get together with your fire team and you say, hey, we all need to come together and agree on this is how we're going to approach this raid race. Are we going for a high placement? Do we just want a contest cleared, get our emblem, get the heck out of there? Or are we going to go in, see how far we get, and have that be the end of it? Have everyone on the same page. Otherwise, there's going to be, your general group cohesion is going to be disrupted, and you can't have that in a contest raid. Another big thing is meta communication. And what that is expectations regarding how to communicate and interpret each other being established in advance. So if I'm in the middle of a heated encounter that might be timed, or we're really close on this 3rd damage phase, not quite sure if we're going to make it, and I'm getting a little angry, my voice is getting raised, having my teammates know that I'm not mad at you, that's just sort of how I'm processing, and that's how this encounter is going. And at the end of the day, we're all competing for the same goal, and even if I'm coming across a little angry, we're not harboring any negative feelings at the end of the day. Successful fire teams are honest fire teams. They're honest with each other, and you can treat wipes or restarts as learning experiences. What went wrong here? Does someone not fully understand an encounter? Is this a teachable moment? Also looking at social psychology, and specifically role theory. If you look at individual encounters of raids, by enacting roles, we sort of exchange relationships with each other and build a dependence that's essential to success. And what I mean by that is, maybe there are 2 or 3 people who have to take a crystal and shoot it at each other to get a boss's shield down. What are other people doing during that? Some people are dedicated ad clear, right? That's just their job. They're set to go slay. And the people who are doing the mechanics won't succeed without the people who are doing ad clear successfully. And the people who are doing ad clear won't get the encounter beaten unless the people who are doing the mechanics do their job successfully. So they build up on each other. I know as a warlock, right, my job is to be support. I put a well down, I have div, I'm gonna make sure everyone's healthy, that's my job. And then I'll take a sec to talk about my fire team specifically. We take it as a marathon and not a sprint. And I'll take us to the Vow of the Disciple raid for a moment. This was the raid that took the contest mode experience from 24 hours to 48 hours due to a bunch of error codes that were happening in the beginning. People were getting DC'd at the end of encounters and having to redo them. And that happened to my fire team. We had to do Caretaker, I believe, 3 times before we were able to move on to Exhibition, which ended up being a pretty grueling encounter. Eventually, we get to Rolk, and that was just a stopping point for us. We slammed our head against Rolk's foot for probably the better part of 7 or 8 hours until Bungie made an announcement that due to the error codes, they were going to extend the raid race from 24 to 48 hours. And what that allowed us to do was the smartest decision we made all night, is go sleep. We said we'd come back in the morning and we'd try it again. And then surely enough, 2 or 3 hours after we woke up and we gave it a fresh run, it was done. And so balance is another thing I want to emphasize here. You have 48 hours now for each raid that has come out since Vow of the Disciple. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. Take time to go grab dinner. Take time for bathroom breaks. If you need to call it and go sleep for 6 to 8 hours and come back. You have the weekend to do it, right? There are a couple other things in the chapter that, again, I don't want to spoil everything, so I'll leave people to read, but I went through each encounter of the Salvation's Edge raid from both my fire team's perspective and sort of a raid race world's first perspective to see how can raids like this take 19 hours to clear for world's first. For Verity specifically, right? This was an encounter that is sort of notorious now for being extremely difficult. Again, I mentioned the geometry, haha, but indicators are a big part of discovering mechanics in encounters, and Verity didn't have a lot of that. Maybe the music changed a little bit when you did something, but there was no actual text like Guardians Make Their Own Fate that showed that you were doing the right thing. And it's pretty much brute force. You take a theory and you run with that theory until the end, and if it's the right theory, congratulations, you beat the encounter. If not, what did we learn? That wasn't the right theory, and we try again. There's also a bunch of tips that I've included that have been generally successful for my fire team. One example I'll give here is to make sure every fire team member understands the mechanics of each encounter before you go on to the next encounter, because Bungie raids like to build on themselves. This encounter is going to be slightly different from the previous encounter, but at its core, this is a mechanic that's going to see itself through the first encounter, second encounter, and probably final boss. What do we do with this info? We've learned that the Edge of Fate is coming out in July, and we have a new raid coming out on the 19th, which is very exciting. And so I'm sure there are a lot of raiders here. I hope to see you guys alongside me and the rest of my fire team, and I want to give a quick shout out to my boys because I wouldn't be here without them. So Travis, Charles, Dan, Joe, Zach, Liam, Paul, Donnie, those are all my guys. So we got some good memories from our raid races, and I hope I get to make some better ones alongside you guys with the next expansion as well.
We joked earlier about it saying Godslayer on there after the, and I was right.
You were.
Sorry. My chapter, Immortalia, is it starts off just talking about the Jade Rabbit, and you're probably like, why? What does that matter? It's just a gun in the game. What does that have to do with anything? Well, the lore card for the Jade Rabbit is inexplicably a Zoloft-style commercial for antidepressants for Guardians, which doesn't really even seem to make a lot of sense on its face, especially where, like, earlier when they introduced the Jade Rabbit, it was like, oh, they're just like scraping metal pieces off of bulwarks and on the moon and stitching it together. It's the cleanest looking gun in the game, but we're expected to believe that someone's like ripping off metal plating and going, yeah, it's a gun now. It's what you see from Cerberus +1, not Jade Rabbit. But In my chapter, I talk a lot about what the Jade Rabbit is like mythologically, like in the real world, but then also how it's treated in the game, especially with Dido as a company. Because Dido, the weapons foundry that makes the Jade Rabbit, they make like no weapons. Right? 2 exotics, a handful of guns are attributed to them in Destiny 1, but they're probably the richest, most influential weapon foundry in the game. They have an office in the tower. Like, I feel like Omelan puts out a new hung jury every week. Have you ever seen an office for them? They don't have one. But Dido, they've got shops on every street corner. They're like the Apple store of guns in Destiny, and they make 2 things. And their other gun, the two-tailed fox, their lore tab is also a commercial for something. And every little title card, every little lore bit that you get from them, it's always a commercial or something about excellence. It's like buying a Mercedes, but it's a gun. So for me, when we first started talking about this, it was the first thing I had mentioned, because it's weird that they're talking about this antidepressant for Guardians. And as those of you who are Guardians, well, why would they even need that? Guardians heal from any wound. They're gods, essentially, but they're not. They're demigods. They heal from any physical wound, but not any mental wounds. And we see that a lot in the game. Amelia talked a little bit about that for her chapter. But what I talked about a lot in this was about how... Sorry, I just died there. It's been a long week. Like, in the real world, soldiers have a lot of PTSD, and they experience a lot of things that gives them a lot of anxiety, depression, things like that. Guardians live for centuries. We look at Shaxx, we look at Zavala, we look at Saladin, and some of them are hundreds of years old, and it's a continuous fight. Our Guardians, even if you've been playing since like Alpha, we've been at this for 10 years, and we've been limping from war to war to war. It never ends. So when you consider that, real-world soldiers experience maybe 5 to 10 years of real combat time, and then like these people are going on for centuries, going from, well, we finally took care of the Vex. Hive. Oh, okay, all right, let's go do that now. They must be experiencing similar problems on a much grander scale. There's also a finite number of ghosts, which means there's a finite number of Guardians. So what I kind of put on my spinfoil hat and dived into was why would Dido want to make antidepressants for Guardians? And what are they really doing there? And it really went right back to the Jade Rabbit, and how the Jade Rabbit really is like telling you exactly what they're doing and what it is. And in mythology, the Jade Rabbit is a being it is a rabbit that is making pills for the gods. It's the pills that make them immortal, but in this case, they're making the pills for the Guardians. And one of the things that they say is, and I'm just going to read out of it because I haven't memorized it, but one of the side effects of the drugs is, side effects may include dancing, salty behavior, and acts of group heroism. And that's obviously Bungie, like winking at the camera, like it's you. You're the Guardians. You're the ones engaging in that. But you got to remember that this is like a commercial in the world, in the lore, in the real game world. That means that we are all taking those drugs. And I don't know where or how that's happening in the game, but the implication there is that, all the Guardians are doing this. Because whenever you go into the tower, what is everyone doing? They're like jumping off buildings and dancing, and Eververse gave them a thumbs up. And they're engaging in that exact behavior. So when they're saying, oh, this is the side effect of doing that, well, that seems to be implying that they're all taking the drugs. And why would the tower want that? Because they're engaged in conflict after conflict after conflict with no end in sight. And Devrim K, even with his No Land Beyond, he's not really making any headway. They need Guardians to go do it. They can't have regular folk do it, and they need to keep Guardians in the fight. And we've seen in the lore where Guardians give up and go home. Has anyone seen Lady Aphrodite? Nope, because we even get lore that she just went off with a bunch of other Guardians, and they have like their own like city somewhere where they don't do that anymore. They don't fight. They don't engage with this. They're just living their lives. And if every Guardian starts doing that, if every Guardian just is breaks down and stops participating, then what? Who's doing the war? Who's taking care of this? So deep dive, there's a lot of post-it notes and string going on in my chapter, basically getting into the theory behind the idea that they're not really a weapons manufacturer. They're like a pharmaceutical company keeping the Guardians in the game, making sure that the last city has the Guardians fighting the war, not just to keep everyone going, but they're not like sending regular folk out to collect glimmer. That's what Guardians do. Guardians go get resources and bring them back to the city. So Guardians aren't just fighting the wars, they're also the streamline of resources for the last city. It's not like they have a farm. I know we have the farm. Not anymore. Well, kind of. It's I accidentally hit pause on my timer. I don't know if I can keep going. Okay. And then I said that, and then immediately trailed off. Yeah, so I in the chapter, I also get into individual Guardians and some of the things that they experience and examples of Guardians that, as they sort of go along, they experience different traumatic events, and we see that play out throughout their character arcs, especially with like the Drifter. He goes through the Dark Ages, ends up on a planet, watches everyone kill themselves. So, like, his whole backstory is watching Guardians go crazy one by one. And it happens often enough in the lore. And then we also have, oh, golly. I can't believe I blanked on this again. Sorry. I'm terrible. You're so mad at me right now. Shayura's Wrath. Shayura, like, her whole story for Trials of Osiris is just her descent into madness and then her redemption. And even there's an entire like group of therapists that are like trying to help Guardians cope. And what do they do with Shayura? Shayura was hunting Guardians down one by one and killing them in mass. And what do they do with Shayura? Let's put her in a 6-month program and then send her right back out into the game. Let's send her right back out to keep on killing aliens. So it seems very clear that even the Vanguard, like their goal is to keep Guardians back in the fight at any cost. So having this weapons foundry that has massive amounts of capital for a weapons foundry that makes no guns, the idea that they're actually just making drugs that are keeping you out and going seems very likely to me, at least.
If you enjoyed these presentations and you want to dive deeper into these topics, please check out this book. We have other topics as well, such as I have 42,000 hours of Destiny 2, and I love that for me. Hold the Salt Guardians, which is a chapter about finding community of like positive-minded individuals. A chapter on fostering a growth mindset that I alluded to at the beginning of this presentation. A chapter on moral disengagement and re-engagement, really analyzing our relationship with the fallen, called You Are My People. A chapter called Don't Hold Your Breath, which is about staying regulated and grounded in a high-pressure situation like the Crucible, and maybe one of the best descriptions of what happens to our bodies when the fight, flight, or freeze system kicks on that I've ever heard. This book is absolutely free. You can go online and download it. Or if you like books as trophies, by all means, order a copy. Put it on a shelf. I prefer a physical copy. Also, please, take the PAX panel survey. If you think we did a good job today, if you want to hear more talks like this in the future, let PAX know. And lastly, we're going to be getting out of here in about a couple minutes, but we will be out in the hallway and down the way just past the escalators, where there'll be like a little seating room if you want to come up to us and ask questions directly. With that, thank you all so much for coming to our panel. All right, have a great rest of your PAX. Get out of here.